Duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now, we are the masters of our fate.
Howdy, gents. Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron podcast. I'm your host, Mike Yarbrough, founder and curator of wolfandiron.com, and I'm so glad you're here. Fellas, I really am glad to welcome you to this podcast episode here with Mark Divine. I'm going to be talking to him here in just a little bit. I always record these intros after I got off the phone talking to the guest, and so I'm always pumped up to just to share this thing with you guys, and I want to get through the intro as soon as possible so that you can get to the actual interview. If you guys don't know who Mark Divine is, you need to go find out. He wrote a book called Unbeatable Mind. He's actually written a number of books. Unbeatable Mind, The Way of the Seal, 8 Weeks to Seal Fit. So you probably recognize him from Seal Fit and things like that. You've probably heard him on other podcasts if you haven't heard him on his own podcast. But he is definitely a guy that you want to follow. And I'll tell you guys what, I was really surprised by just the different tone, I guess, of this conversation than what I expected to have. Some of you guys know this. I was in the Navy just for a few years. And, we saw a couple of SEALs, I didn't really get a chance to meet them, didn't get a chance to talk to them. These guys were they were kind of like royalty. They were like Navy royalty, basically. And so I'm sure they were really nice guys, but, we got to hear more stories about them than we did get a chance to actually interact with them. And so, those guys can, and then you also got Jocko and Leif and some of these other guys that are kind of coming up, today and we're finding out about. It just makes you think this mindset of a SEAL is just, I'm a badass. Everything I do is kill, 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 right? I mean, you guys get that. And there's something that's really cool and about that. And there's an aspect of that we need. I didn't really know how Mark really kind of was, honestly. And so what I found with this conversation was that if you didn't know he was a SEAL, you just think that he's just a super nice, well together, kind of well thought out, put together, fit guy. And that's one of the things I actually really enjoyed about this conversation was I felt like there were plenty of different directions that we could go with the conversation, but that we did get into a lot of stuff about just your mindfulness, your awareness, getting rid of distractions and just the nonsense that's kind of constantly just around us and all the negativity and things like that, and really be able to start down this path of developing an unbeatable mind. And the conversation just flowed, guys. It just flowed really well. And so I know you guys are going to get a lot from it. Listen, if you want to find out more about Mark Divine, you can go to wolfandiron.com/Mark Divine. That's DIVINE. And head over there. You'll see the show notes for this episode. You'll see all the ways to get in touch with Mark and follow any of the stuff that he's doing. Check out the books that he's got out there and stuff like that. And I think that's about it, guys. Listen, I appreciate you for tuning in. It was great to partner with Mark on this episode because we're kind of in the same vein of helping men move forward and to become more than what the status quo is. That calling that you feel in your life, that high call that you know is there, the thing that's saying, get off the couch, do more, be somebody, leave a legacy. That's just not chatter that's there for, like some kind of evolutionary thing that you need to get rid of. I don't know what you've been taught today by society, but that exists to actually help motivate you, to build you up, to make you want to be a better man and pursue that. And so guys like Mark and myself and some of the other guys out there that I'm sure you follow are getting things done. And it's really, really important, guys. It's really important work. And so I do appreciate you being here. Okay, that's it. On with the interview. Here's Mark Divine. Mr. Mark Divine, welcome to the Wolf and Iron podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's my honor.
Well, sir, you're well known, at least in my circles, I'm sure, of the guys who follow Wolf and Iron. They would definitely want to be inspired by men such as yourself, and I'm just it is an honor to have you here. Not just because you've been a SEAL or are a SEAL. I'm not really sure how that works, but that you've brought so much back to us, and you're doing so much inspirational work for folks out there, and with what you've done. So, for the guys who maybe they've heard your name, seen your book, but maybe don't know your story. If you can, in brief, just give us a little bit of your background and kind of how you got to where you are and what you're doing now.
Sure. I'll try to be brief. So I was born at a very young age, upstate New York. No, I'm just kidding. I won't go that far back. But you mentioned Navy SEALs, so a lot of people kind of ping on that. I was a SEAL for 20 years, half of that active duty, half reserve. I was active duty prior to 9/11, so in the 90s primarily. Served at SEAL Team 3. I was an officer, so lieutenant there. Had a couple platoons there. SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team 1 in Hawaii, subsurface warfare, mini submarine driving, that kind of stuff, sneaky peek stuff. And then I got up active duty, stayed in the reserves, and then I became an entrepreneur. SEALs and entrepreneurs kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
We can talk about why, but it's really the mindset. And as an entrepreneur, I started a variety of things. The first thing was a brewing company, one of the first, actually fourth brewery in San Diego. So I could say one of the first. We were the fourth in San Diego.
Yeah.
And still cranking today, although I sold my interest about 5 years into this massive battle I had with my partner / brothers-in-law. That's a 2-beer story. So we won't get into that one. Anyways, great learning experience for me. You never really quite get it right the first time around.
Right.
And then I launched NavySeals.com, which is like a web portal for SEALs. I really cared about the SEALs, and obviously I was still in. When the internet came around, I was like, someone's going to do this, and it better be a SEAL. So I registered NavySeals.com and kind of launched an information recruiting and e-commerce portal for that. And we still run that, but that morphed into government contracting. I got hired largely as a result of NavySeals.com because I started mentoring trainees through the platform and organizing meetups for training and offering tips, and we had forums. And so I was hired by the Navy Recruiting Command to develop a nationwide mentoring program for SEAL candidates. That was back in 2006. Launched that program. It was a government contract. Organized a whole new business for that. And a year later, this little billion-dollar company named Blackwater basically stole it from me. So
Wow.
I looked at that and said, okay, do I really want to swim with the sharks in government contracting and have this happen to me over and over again? And I was like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. So that was a short-lived company. But I did want to continue to train the Spec Ops candidates, and I wanted to do it in a unique way. At the time, I was getting my doctorate in leadership at the University of San Diego. I was teaching leadership there. And so all this is going through my mind. All this is happening about the same time that I got recalled to active duty to go back to war. So I went to Iraq in 2004. And while I was there, I had a lot of time to think. And I also was doing a special project. So I wasn't kicking down doors. I was doing something that was unique, right? I was trying to help the Navy determine, or the DoD determine, whether the Marines should be part of Spec Ops. And they had put a 100-man unit together, sent them over with SEAL Team 1, and they were going to test this Marine unit. They called the Marine SOCOM Det, to see whether they had what it takes to operate as soft operators in the murky, complex world of special ops and with different, chains of command and all this kind of stuff. So it's called a proof of concept. So I was there to study it, observe it, help out. At any rate, that meant I had a lot of time over my schedule. I could basically dictate my own schedule. And so I started to train myself every day using everything that I knew, from my lifetime of, hardcore functional fitness, Zen meditation, which I was doing well before I joined the SEALs, yoga. I had gotten into yoga in the late 90s. Yeah, so 1998, I think. And I've been a martial artist since I was 19 years old. Never stopped training. And so I said, I want to continue to train all these. And I put it together as an integrated training program I called Warrior Yoga, later changed the name to Kokoro Yoga. So that basically became the foundation for a new business. When I told you I wasn't going to be able to do this quick.
No, it's great. This is great.
But it's a fun story. So what I'm trying to suggest is that time in Iraq when I was in combat, for the first time, believe it or not, and I didn't really see combat. I did a lot of intel gathering missions and training missions and, different kind of stuff when I was on active duty, but it wasn't until I was a reserve officer as a lieutenant commander in Iraq that I actually saw combat. It's kind of interesting. But so when I was there, I decided that the academic path was not for me. You know, I loved leadership. I loved teaching people how to basically maximize their potential and peak their performance. I wanted to teach spec ops and SEALs, but, you know, the government contract was basically kaput. You know, I wasn't going to get back into government contracting, so I decided while I was over there to leave the PhD program, leave the teaching assignment, you know, the professorship, and to start my business, SEAL Fit. So we launched that in 2006. And I started teaching spec ops candidates basically how to dominate, right? How to think well, how to control their mind and emotions, how to, control their stress response, how to lead, how to be an excellent teammate. You know, it covered a pretty broad gamut. And I ran these 30-day immersion programs, you know, like true, you know, man stuff. Like guys would come and live with me, and we'd train from 6 a.m. until like 8 or 9 p.m.
Jeez.
And, you know, sometimes around the clock. And we would end with 50 hours of nonstop training, which is kind of like a mini hell week.
Yeah.
And when I noticed these guys were going to buds and just kicking ass.
Yeah.
And over the years, 90% of the guys that I was training for SEAL, Spec Ops, MARSOC, Ranger, whatever, were making it through their training program. And they were showing up as like more complete, like warriors, meaning they like were always positive, always had a smile on their face, always very helpful, always very respectful and humble. You know, not the same as, you know, you would expect as a young SEAL, but they come out, you know, or a young special forces guy would often come out kind of cocky.
Yeah, arrogant, yeah.
And they have to be kind of like beat down by some of the older guys before they, you know, begin to develop the humility and the silent, you know, quiet warrior attributes. But these guys are going in like that. And so that was really cool to see that happening. Now the SEALs have begun to borrow some of the techniques that we've used, and, you know, they've been up. A lot of my instructors are SEAL instructors, you know, active SEAL instructors or contracted SEAL instructors. So SEAL Fit is going on today. We're about 10 years into it. Actually, no, 12 years into it, I guess. And we've trained, you know, people from probably like 30 different countries, all allied, of course.
Yeah.
And we still run these 50-hour camps, and now we've collapsed the 30-day to 3-day academies. We can't do 30 days anymore. But anyways, so then out of that, I build a whole curriculum for civilians, and we allow civilians to come to SEAL Fit. Obviously, a lot of athletes and CrossFitters and warriors come to it, but I built it for Spec Ops guys. And so we never reduce the standards. In fact, we keep making it more challenging, you know, in certain ways. But not everyone in the world wants or can do that. And so I built a whole curriculum for developing mental toughness, resiliency, peaking your performance, you know, becoming a better teammate, developing a, you know, heart-centered orientation toward communication and leadership, and serving the world at what I call world-centric care and concern level. And that's called Unbeatable Mind. And so that's, I have a book out called Unbeatable Mind. And, you know, I'm spending most of my time training individuals, teams, and now organizations in the Unbeatable Mind training. Sorry, that was a long-winded whole intro there.
No, that's great. That gave us a great overview. I hate to ask, you know, guests to say, hey, give me your story, because they've probably told it so many times and they may get tired of it. But with a story like that, I mean, look, I don't know if I'd get tired of it. That's awesome.
I know. I could have just said I'm an author and an entrepreneur and just left it at that, but just asked some
you gave me questions. You gave me a lot of jumping off points here, too. There's a lot of things I have questions about. So for the guys that are coming into the SEAL Fit, or even the people who are coming in now, but especially in those early days when they had to, you know, there's going to be this 30-day period with you, what was the condition, the mindset of them who came in there? I mean, like, did people know, like, I'm getting ready to get it handed to me? And is there a tremendous washout rate from that, just like there is when people are going through buds and that kind of stuff, or was it different?
Well, the academy was really meant to take you from, you know, it was everything training. Like, you have to come. Let me back up. You have to come to the training with some foundation, or else it's just going to be impossible.
Yeah.
So SEAL Fit has always been good to great training, right? It's not, you know, it's not for beginners, right? It's not even a fitness program, right? It is a character development program.
Okay.
But you have to be fit in order to begin to do it, right? because we're going to push you harder than you've ever been pushed anywhere in your life. And that's not just physical, it's physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So yeah, we had a significant washout rate, but because the academy was so long and arduous, and so, we were very clear about what it was, and it was not insignificant in terms of an investment. The 30-day academy, initially it was $3,000, but we shortened it up and charged $7,000 after a while because it was just a lot of work,
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, so most of the people coming were Spec Ops candidates, who knew that they had to be basically in shape, and still a lot of people showed up unprepared and didn't make it. But let me shift fire. So we're best known for our 50-hour Crucible kind of Hell Week variant we call Kokoro Camp. Kokoro, I chose that word because it means merging your heart and your mind into your actions. And that was, to me, really represented what we were trying to accomplish with the program, and sounded way better than like Feel Fit Camp, And so the Kokoro Camp is 50 hours nonstop, round-the-clock training, room and board included.
Great.
Because there is no board, people love that. But anyway, so now today we run that program, and if we have a camp, a class of 50 individuals, we're lucky if we'll get, 25% of them through the training.
Yeah.
But 12 to 15. And we've had programs, where we've had 20 people enrolled and only 1 or 3 graduate. It's hard work, right?
Yeah.
Most people will self-select out, anywhere at the 4 to 12 hour mark. And they'll basically, feel very, some people are really regret it, but others are like, you know what? I just didn't understand what I was getting myself into.
Sure. Yeah.
I just didn't know how to prepare properly. I'm going to go back and do it right.
That's
come back, and do it right. And then we'll see maybe a third to a half of them come back and dominate it the next time, because, they really want to accomplish, the goal.
What would be interesting to, I don't know if it's been around long enough now. I don't know if 12 years is long enough to see this, but I've talked to some other people on the podcast that have been teachers. They've been in the school system and stuff like that, 20, 25 years, something like that. And they've been in the system long enough to see that the culture and the generation of young people has just changed. I mean, we're fatter, we're softer, we're mentally softer. We don't look really healthy in a lot of cases. You go to school, right? Most kids don't look typically healthy as they would have, 30, 40, 50 years ago, especially for my grandparents' generation. But it'll be interesting to see if the washout rate or the things that you have to teach to the next generation, that's kind of coming through the cycle, changes. If it becomes more difficult to get these guys prepped and ready for Spec Ops, for SEALs and that kind of stuff, because as society kind of degrades in its own kind of way, there's also a lot of work that needs to be done to kind of bring people back up to, where they need to be competent. I don't know if you guys have seen that at all.
You know what? Actually, we haven't. I don't care, what's happening with the mainstream population in society. You're always going to have the sheepdogs and the warriors, and those individuals are going to seek out the best training, and they're going to train themselves. I think that's an archetype that, it's a calling in life, and warriors will look around and they may look at disdain with the growing malaise of society, but it also means that they've got more work to do. They're going to be employed, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like job security. So we're seeing people come to our training because we got such a great reputation, and, we're like gold standard for testing yourself, like, really fit, and people, I think the word is out for us that don't fuck around with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't come, just show up to hope you can do it, right? Prepare for it. If you should be preparing for 6 months to a year for it, the only people who can like just come and do it are like serious athletes, like serious, endurance athletes, Spec Ops, athletes who've been training for at least a year to 2 years on a foundation of athleticism in high school or college. Those types are coming in and doing really well. Or, like CrossFitters have been cranking out. But even those guys, if they're not, doing seriously long runs and rucks, they CrossFitters are used to like the 6-minute WODs. They're not doing really good either. So,
yeah.
But my point is that you know, we have 40 million people in the United States. And, you know, because the population is growing, it's like the middle bulge, you know, as the population grows, is growing fatter along with the bulge of the population. But there's, you know, the fringes, you know, our fringe is basically those people who want to be warriors and sheepdogs and train themselves, you know, at that level. Well, that's growing also, right?
Yeah.
Because statistically, there's more of them. So, you know, it's kind of a good news, bad news type thing.
Not only that, but you guys stand out. I mean, I think that's
True.
Seals have all, you know, have been impressive, you know, since the beginning, but they've, lately, I think it's more of you guys are standing as an example of, something completely different than what we're told to expect from ourselves, what society offers, and those kinds of things. And thankfully, we're getting a chance to see more, you know, kind of SEALs coming to the forefront. And like you said, SEALs are really kind of drawn to entrepreneurship. Many of them become authors if they're not doing something similar to what you're doing. And they want to continue to inspire and set that example. So, like you said, as a sheepdog.
Yeah. Well, like, you know, like Jocko is a good example. Like
yeah.
He came to the forefront very quickly. He's a very powerful guy, and he you know, presents like this intense warrior attitude and stance. The guy is super clear. I know Jocko. I've met him a number of times. Just a solid operator. And it makes sense that once he turns his focus and mind at teaching, you know, his principles, his variation, you know, which is different than mine, but it's equally valid, or, you know, whatever. It's going to appeal to probably a slightly different population than me. But, man, he's like skyrocketed to instant success. And, you know, I came into the world into this type of training earlier than him. And I focused on training individuals one-on-one. I didn't get into podcasting until just a few years ago and stuff like that. And it's interesting. Timing right now is so crazily easy for people if they've got an important message and they can focus properly to really have an impact, right? It's taken me a long time because, you know, podcasting didn't exist when I started. You know, we were just trying to figure out internet marketing. You know, things were really different. But now it's like, bam, boom, plug and play. You know, you want to self-publish a book? You know, just hire this company. They'll do it for you. You want to do a podcast? Hire this company and they'll help you out, you know, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But anyways, back to your point, there are a few people, but like Jocko, myself, and, you know, there's only a few others that have really taken it to like serious training and educational realm. We stand as kind of like what I call the law of contrast, which I think is kind of what you were saying. It's like we are out there saying, okay, look over here. Here's what you could be, right? Yeah. And look around you. This is what you have, right? So you're living in a world of major distraction. You're living in a world of digital addiction. You're living in a world where mediocrity is the norm and also celebrated, right? Yeah. You're living in a world where, you know, most of the food choices are crap. And unfortunately, that was also, you know, mandated by the FDA. You're living in a world where sickness is mandated by their government. And so who's your friend, right? Are you going to outsource your brain? Are you going to outsource your brain to your health insurance and to your doctors and, you know, this whole sickness industry? Are you outsource your brain to your teachers who basically are teaching government, you know, funneled or channeled or approved curriculum? And are you going to outsource your brain to, you know, the scientific community, which is basically paid off by the corporations?
Exactly.
And most people have.
Yeah.
And we're saying is, you know what? You're fucked if you do that. So this is what it looks like over here if you don't do that, right? If you don't do that, you could be as fit and as healthy as you're meant to be and never really have to see a doctor again unless you have a major crisis. And guess what? You'll save on food costs. You'll save on medical costs, and and fitness even, because, you know, when you learn how to train, you realize you really don't need a gym. You know, it's fun to have a gym, but you don't need a gym. You got the outdoors. You got a few pieces of equipment in your trunk or in your garage. So learn how to move your body and move it effectively and in different ways and with intensity, and boom, you got yourself a functional fitness program. So learn how to think. You know, learn how to think better. Learn how to think for yourself. Learn how to do the work to eradicate all the biases and all the bullshit you've been told and all the stories that your family fed you and all the memes that you take on as your beliefs, and start to, you know, examine reality and truth through, techniques like we teach in Unbeatable Mind.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you kind of touched on this. When I forgot to tell you this actually before we started the podcast, but I was actually in the Navy, and I remember when I was in boot camp, I remember we had a couple of guys that were going to be trying out for the SEALs. And so when we were done doing our push-ups and our sit-ups and all that kind of stuff, we were all worn out, freaking puking because we're all sick and everything else. These guys they're still huffing it, right? They're still going, right? Just doing push-ups. It's like you just turn around, they're always just doing push-ups and sit-ups. They're just getting ready for it.
Right.
And you began to realize these guys they've come from a different place, or maybe you want to say they're a different breed, they're a different character. They're just different than us. And obviously that's what we see with you guys, and that's one of the reasons why so many of us are drawn to what the SEALs are doing, what you guys bring back. But at the same time, I'm always curious, what do SEALs see when they look at us, right? Like when you guys come back, or you've gone through SEALs and you've gone through whatever kind of hell you've been through, and you come back into the regular world, and I think you touched on this a little bit, like what's your view of the kind of the shape of things? I don't know if you can expound on it more than you just did, but that would be like, I really kind of want to know your guys' take on it.
I have maybe a different view than, let's say, my friend Jocko. I mean, I think that I've taught myself to look for the good and to see things from an abundance mindset. I see a lot of people who really want to better themselves and want to better the world. I see especially millennials and younger millennials and Gen I are coming into the world and be like, you know what? I don't want to repeat the mistakes of the industrial age. I see some brilliant entrepreneurs who have a world-centric, save humanity kind of drive. Like, look at Elon Musk and some of these people who are really creating companies that have a global impact, are changing the way things are done. I see technology and information being disseminated globally that's going to allow, maybe someday like hundreds of millions of people to be able to access Unbeatable Mind training and to improve their lives.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's incredible. Like, this is just an extraordinary time to be alive. I also see the dark side, which is, the growing existential threats, right? From all corners. Like, we have more existential threats to humanity today than ever before in history, to include the environment destruction, and I'm not going to use the term global warming, but it is partly it, but it's also just us destroying the earth, like raping Mother Earth in this linear, extraction, production, and, throw things away into a big garbage heap in the Pacific Ocean kind of lifestyle that the last 100 years has foisted upon us and upon the earth. And it hasn't been very wise, right? We've lost our wisdom as humanity to be able to steward Mother Earth. So that's an existential threat. Nuclear weapons, another one. Well, it's insane. Like, it's insane that humanity would develop nuclear weapons that can destroy humanity. Like, how does this even come about?
Yeah.
Who thinks that's a good idea? You know what I mean? So how do we get rid of that? I mean, I have no idea what the answer is, but it's insane. Artificial intelligence, another one. Like, we're just barreling ahead to create artificial intelligence. What happens when the singularity occurs and all of a sudden AI is, smarter, stronger than all human brains on the planet? What do we do then? What's going to happen? We don't know, but we're barreling ahead and doing it anyways, So at any rate, there's this yin and this yang. There's this tug of war between the good and the bad, between, light and dark. And the more that we all focus on the light, the more likely it is for the light to win, right? And that's why I look at this and, for me to like disdain people who aren't super fit and healthy and walking their talk and living, by a code and no, that's like buying into negativity.
Yeah.
I'd much rather take a positive approach and say, you know what, here's what's worked for me, and here's what's worked for the SEALs. And, you got to cultivate the win in your mind. You've got to, we are wired for negativity. And what you're seeing in the world and network TV and in politics is essentially a magnification through social media and through TV of the human mind's proclivity to veer toward the negative. it's the way we're wired as human beings, right? Because we had to avoid danger, so we didn't get eaten on the plains, you know?
Sure.
So it takes active intervention in your own mind to rewire the circuitry so that you're wired for the positive, so that you see the positive, you feel the positive, you project positive, and you attract positive energy. That's really one of the underlying drivers for Unbeatable Mind, is to rewire individuals and then hopefully a large tribe someday so that they're positive. And then the positive approach or mindset essentially eradicates negative, because it's kind of like a shadow. If you think of the negative as like a shadow, when you think positively, the shadow just automatically disappears. It's not there anymore. Fear goes away, anger goes away, hatred goes away, jealousy goes away. All the dark energies that are driving people's negativity and behavior in the world, they go away. Fighting goes away. And now, can you imagine if we had, you know, like 1 billion people on the planet who had that kind of positive mindset, and we're able to eradicate that shadow that's trailing all human beings and tribes and cultures? Then you're talking about massive transformation. So that's what I'm working toward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sounds grandiose, but it's not. It's like, that's what I'm working for. And I'm not the only one either. You know, I think there's working together, including you. Like, part of your mission, I imagine, is to help people be healthier and more positive. I noticed that, you know, Wolf and Iron, to me, I have a wolf on the cover of my book, Unbeatable Mind. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah.
I'm staring down a wolf, and that wolf represents me staring down the fear, staring down fear and cultivating courage. And it's based upon the Native American, you know, story of the wolf of fear and the wolf of courage.
Yeah.
The wolf of fear lives in your head. And that's why, because everyone is in their head instead of in their heart, mind, or whole mind. And when you're just in your head, if you think that is where your mind is, then you're going to be fearful. So you got to cultivate the courage wolf, and he lives in your heart. And your heart is part of your mind, and so is your belly. And that's why I use the term whole mind. When you cultivate unbeatable mind, and whole mind are synonymous. When you cultivate an unbeatable mind, then you're not living from your head anymore. Right? You're living in your body, and your body becomes your mind. And that's feeding the courage wolf. And when you feed the courage wolf, it starves the fear wolf, which is the same thing as saying the light eliminates the shadow. And then, you know, darkness and fear and anger and negative people can never hurt you after that.
Yeah, it's awesome. And yeah, I have noticed that, the wolf on the cover. And we have a thing for Wolf and Iron. We kind of two things. We say, feed the wolf, be the iron. So feeding the wolf is a lot of what you're talking about. It also has to do with not just that you're feeding the right wolf. I kind of look at it more as, what are you feeding it? Like, you know, it's what kind of, what's the nutrition, I guess, that you're giving it, the spiritual, the emotional, the physical, whatever, the nutrition that you're giving it, because where it comes from, it matters, right? I mean, like, you can have a guy who's, if your goal is just courage, general sense courage, well, you could end up being a very courageous, terrible person.
Yes.
You know, so there's got to be something.
You could be a courageous asshole.
Right. You could be a Nazi or whatever, you know. So I mean, there's the substance as well that matters so much, and I think that's where that light comes in, is that you're talking about. It's like that light's got to be there to overcome the shadow that would want to steer that good quality in the wrong direction. That's great. So give us some principles then around this. Having the unbeatable mind. How does somebody achieve that? Because that's what I want. That's what anybody who's listening to this podcast, that's what we want. We don't want this fear, this negativity, this nonsense, this constant dribble that's in our head that keeps us and holds us back. We want to be able to move forward with positivity, and but at the same time, we've got to be realistic. So how does this work? Give us some principles to navigate this.
Well, we have, you know, to me, it requires that we acknowledge that everything that we do in life, every action we take, every behavior we have, and everything we create starts first in the mind, right? That's just a fact. So our negativity also starts in the mind. And so now we got to essentially, once we acknowledge that and we realize that we create our own reality, and then outside us, you know, around us in our world, it's co-created, right? So some of it seems random, but at some level it's co-created, right? It might have been actions that were taken by our parents, but we co-create the reality that we live in.
Sure.
So what we say is, okay, now what we have to do is acknowledging that, let's develop a process for turning our attention inward so that we can become the creators. We can become better creators. Instead of creating randomly, and if you just leave it to chance, then your negative mind, which is being fed usually with negative stuff, for instance, like you said very well, if you watch TV, then you're feeding it with negative stuff. Because even if a commercial like on TV seems positive, it's programming, right? You're outsourcing your brain. You're outsourcing your brain to a marketing person who's planting subliminal messages for a product that's either damaging something, environment, or supporting an industry that is corrupt, like the pharmaceutical industry or the defense industry, or it's promoting something that's not healthy for you or you don't need.
Yep.
So you're outsourcing. If you watch network news, it's very, very addictive, right? But basically you're outsourcing your mind to the negative drama, right, of that whole kind of dance or that drama that's playing out there. And all that is really manipulation and not creative, right? So you're damaging your ability to generate positive self-creation in your inner domain, in your mind. So you got to stop feeding that shit. So you have to take a look at what are you letting in. So you got to radically declutter your environment and simplify it. So turn off the TV, get it out of the house, or radically limit. Like we do watch some downloads of, great TV shows or documentaries from Amazon or Netflix, but that's it. Never watch TV unless it's like the Super Bowl,
right,
which is fun. And you cut out negative people from your life because they're not doing you any good, and you cut out negative food that's got negative, harmful qualities to it. Easy day, just cut that shit out. So you just take a scalpel to your life and cut out all the negative stuff, and then. So that's part one. Part two is to carve out. When you do that, guess what? You free up all this time, right?
Yeah.
Free up an enormous amount of time. And then you carve out time to be with yourself, right? So that can be in nature. It can be in meditation, yoga, but it's time with yourself. I don't mean like going to the MMA mat or jiu-jitsu. That's exercise, and it will develop mental toughness. I'm talking about developing a process to tame your mind so that you can then begin to actively feed the courage wolf and starve the fear wolf, right? Using our language of earlier. Now that is like the core of our initial training in Unbeatable Mind. We have a specific process for learning how to tame your mind, to be able to direct your concentration at one thing for a long period of time until you have the sustained attention and you're not distracted anymore, and you get rid of that monkey mind with your ping pong ball mind. And then you turn that attention inward and look deeply at your life and the patterns that have been driving your behavior and the negativity. And then you begin to overwrite that, just like you'd overwrite a CD with positive internal dialogue and imagery. And then you begin to recreate a new story of your life, right? And so essentially you create a new image of who you are, who you're meant to be, and then you practice that every day in your mind's eye, in your heart, mind, the mind's eye that isn't a heart, the whole mind's eye.
Yeah.
And you practice it, and then you begin to create dialogue around it and new imagery around it. And then you basically begin to act that out, right? And so that acting out is almost like taking an acting class. Like, okay, if you don't believe right away that this is the new version of yourself, then you start pretending it, fake it till you make it. But those actions are the practicing in the real world is really the outer extension of the inner design, right? So just like, if you were to if you were an architect and you got to build a building, first you got to see it in your mind's eye, then you got to put it on a piece of paper, and then you hire the contractor to start building it. So it's kind of like that. First you got to see it, then you got to basically design it, and then you got to take action on it. So I believe that anybody can transform themselves into a much bigger, better version, positive, courageable version of themselves, and serve the world more powerfully. But first they have to design that in their mind, their whole mind. And so, and they work on that until they absolutely, utterly believe it and are passionate about it. So that there's no way they'll ever quit or go or turn back or let, the negative people in the world sidetrack them.
So I'm hearing this and I'm thinking, okay, there's two extremes here. There's or maybe there's only one really extreme, and that would be delusion, self-delusion, right? Where we believe everything is positive. Nothing can hurt me. Nothing can stop me. Every path I choose is going to be a positive outcome, so on and so forth. And there's the path of truth. I'm trying to dispel negativity so that I can actually believe things that are true, and rather than things that are false and fear and worry and those kinds of things that keep me from moving forward. What is the kind of the reference point there that keeps people navigating down the true path rather than going down the extreme delusional, nothing can touch me path?
Well, I think there are a lot of people on that delusionary path. The whole New Age movement is that. Yeah. Right. It's spiritual egoism. And a lot of, what I see in the yoga community is delusion, right? Because people are dressing up fancy and they're basically doing yoga exercise and they're talking the flowery terms and namasteing. And then they're flipping someone off when they get cut off on the highway. And, they're just not, it's not whole. It's not real. Right. So, there's a lot of spiritual egoism in that. But, my whole process is more of a warrior's truth, right? So warriors are, and anyone can be a warrior, by the way. It's like anyone can tap into that warrior archetype and often needs to be a warrior to stand your ground and do the right thing in spite of what other people are telling you and trying to, take you off track. So you need to be a warrior to fight against the negativity and the malaise of society that we talked about earlier. It doesn't mean you have to join the military and be a SEAL or a cop, right? That's the sheepdog. Sheepdogs are obviously warriors, but everybody listening to this is a warrior in some capacity. So the warrior's path is to always check yourself against reality. And we used to have this saying in my martial arts Zen master school, one day, one lifetime. So what that means is every day is an opportunity to grow. Every day is an opportunity to learn. Every day is an opportunity to experience a lifetime. And every day might be your last. Right? Yeah, yeah. So you treat every day like as a sacred event. You wake up, and what you do in the morning, what you do first thing is critical. Right? What's the first thing you do? What's the first thought that comes into your mind? And what do you do about it? If it's negative, you get rid of it and you replace it with gratitude. What's the first thing you put in your body? Well, it should be a fresh glass of water. Yeah. What's the first thing that you're going to actively do? Well, it should be to begin to control your body's physiology through breath, and then to begin to concentrate on, this new version of yourself, and to stoke the inner domain of potential. So the first thing you're really doing is winning in your mind, and that's where the meditative practice comes in that we talk about, a morning ritual. And then, you get very clear upon what you're going to do today, because this might be your last. And oh, by the way, you're a warrior. So all your actions have to be precise. Every arrow must hit the target. You want them to hit the center of the target. So you're going to look at your plan for the day and be like, oh my God, I'm shooting too many arrows. There's too many things coming at me. I've committed to too many meetings, too many phone calls, too many projects. And so you can look at that and say, okay, let me streamline. Take that off, take that off, take that off. Now I've got to nail these 2 or 3 things. And then you just do one of them at a time until you're done. And you focus with that intense concentration that you've developed. And throughout the day, as you feel like your willpower waning or your fatigue waning, you have, your training to fall back on, right? And so you take a moment to do some breathing. You take a moment to do some visualizing. You take a moment to do some movement. Could be some pull-ups, push-ups, squats, burpees, barbell sit up in the corner. You just go start moving. right? And it changes you, and you're feeding the courage wolf, right? With your internal dialogue and your imagery throughout the day, right? Your life is a practice, but you only have to do it one day at a time. And then at the end of the day, you do more practice. And for me, the most powerful practice is re-engaging with your family, practicing being present, practicing getting rid of setting your iPhone off and putting it in, closet, practicing keeping the TV off and, playing chess or reading instead, practicing authentic listening with your, wife or girlfriend or spouse or whatever, and your kids, where you're not judging, you're not thinking you have all the answers, you're not, trying to solve a problem while they're talking to you. You're just being present and listening. That's a practice, but it really has dramatic impact on improving your relationships and deepening your own kokoro, heart, mind. And then before you go to bed, there's the second bookend. Now, this is where you look back at the day and say, okay, warrior, how did I do?
Yeah.
Okay. How did I wake up? Well, I could have done better there. Check, learn from it, and commit to improving. How did I do in my target practice during the day? Did I hit my targets? Was I off mark? Was I distracted? Did I let my waning willpower get to me, or did I recharge appropriately? So you recapitulate your day and you find the biggest lessons learned, and you eradicate any regrets. Like, oh man, I wish I had done better in that conversation. Good. Learn from it. Let it go. Can't drag any kettlebells of regret to bed with you. And then you end up getting a good night's sleep. And guess what? Tomorrow you do it all over again. So that to me is like, that's very, very practical. You just take things one day at a time. You're not like in this airy fairy world, like, oh, all is good. I'm going to be I'm going to be Tim Ferriss someday or Jocko Willink because I just want it. Well, shit, we want a lot of things in life.
Right on.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you got to be sure that what you want is good for you. And if it's good for you and it's good for the world and it's something you feel strongly about, then design it in your mind until you've won it in your mind, and then go after it with a fury,
Yeah.
But don't do too many of those things at once.
I want to point something out here for the guys who are listening to this, and for you as well. This is probably something you've heard before, but as I'm listening to you talk, there's a uniqueness about you and about your message. The thing that I'm hearing here is this guy's he's a warrior, he's a badass, he's tough, he's determined, but at the same time, you've got this soft spirit about you, where you're not just like, go out and crush every single day and make every day, a painstaking victory and whatever the case is. There's a lot
Right.
there's a lot of like stuff that guys shy away from, but I think it's critically important. And a lot of times we say these things don't go along with the warrior mindset, but you're talking about mindfulness, awareness, limiting distractions, being aware of your internal dialogue, right? These are, that kind of stuff is, I think it's awesome, man. And I think that you're a really unique individual to have these properties and these qualities come together and to be able to share that.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you for saying that. I can shed some light on that. So I have this two principles in Unbeatable Mind, which are critical. One is that we call them the 5 mountains. And you kind of alluded to this. So you share this philosophy, and that we have to develop ourselves in a multidimensional fashion. And we think of 5 primary domains that we have to develop ourselves: physically, mentally, emotionally, intuitionally, and spiritually. We use the term kokoro for that: heart, mind, whole mind.
Yeah.
Not religion, not any concept of God or anything like that, but it's like our spiritual strength. And those are trained together and simultaneously in an integrated fashion, and that leads to accelerated growth vertically. And what I mean by vertical growth versus horizontal. Horizontal growth is like, I want to learn how to shoot. So first I have to learn how to hold the weapon, load the weapon, clear the weapon, dry fire the weapon, and then I got to shoot a 25-yard target. And I keep practicing those until I'm really good at it and I can shoot as an expert marksman. And I've developed this awesome horizontal skill of being a good shooter. But guess what? That doesn't change me as a person.
Yeah.
I'm just the same person, but I'm a good shooter. Vertical development is when you integrate those 5 levels and you begin to practice them daily. A lot of the skills of those 5 levels include things like mindfulness and visualization and feeding the courage wolf and the things we've been talking about. then what we do is we grow vertically. And that means you're changing your level of consciousness and who you are as a human being, your sense of self, your worldview. And generally speaking, though, that worldview goes through what I call 5 plateaus. So you got the 5 mountains that develop you through these 5 plateaus. Now, we have all these in us, these 5 plateaus, but ideally we want to ascend to the 5th plateau, which is where we have integrated world-centric care and concern. At any other of the plateaus, we are ethnocentric and limited. Doesn't mean we can't succeed. We could still be billionaires. We could still be expert podcasters, and we could still be Navy SEALs. So the first plateau is really survival instinctual. And this is really the lowest level, but we can get pulled there. Like if we get sucked into a fight, or, if we haven't dealt with our emotions and we let anger, I dealt with this last night where, I pulled into a parking, at my HOA place where I live. I pulled in because I needed to send a text real quick. And I was in my community. It's a gated community. So I pulled in this parking area, but I was blocking like 3 parking spots because I was going to be there for like 30 seconds to send a voice text. And this guy who's on the board must have recognized my car, and I've got a license plate that says Sealfic, comes up while I'm voice texting to the window, knocks on the window, and he's like, "You're blocking my and he's like about ready to blow a gasket. I could see the steam coming out of his ear, and I just smile at him. And I roll down the window and goes, "You're blocking 5 spots." And I said, "I know, sir, I'll just be here a second." He goes, "Well, move." And I was like, I just smiled again, and my mind is going like, my old self would want to just light this guy up right now. But I'm like, my current self just says, oh, man, this guy's really having a bad day. You know what I mean? He's going to give himself a heart attack. So I just smile at him again. I finish up my text, and then he goes, "Now!" like screaming off the top of his lungs. And I just smiled and waved at him and drove off. And I was like, holy shit, that guy's having a bad day,
Yeah.
That was 5th plateau in me looking at that. Now, if I was a 1st plateau person, I would have descended right to his level and given it right back to him. And a lot of people, and there was certainly that urge, and I could feel that urge. And I said, oh my God, there's my 1st plateau energy. What could have I said in that moment? You know what I mean? To really let this guy know that I was the boss and he was being a jerk. So 1st plateau is instinctual survival mode. And, so anyone who's in survival mode, Syria, everyone there is 1st plateau. You just don't have the chance. It's unfortunate. But also, like if you're in America, the most abundant country in the world, but you're living on the streets in New York or homeless, you're 1st plateau.
Right.
Second plateau are those who are trying to protect the status quo. Like I've carved out a pretty good life. I got to protect it. Or I've got a position in the company, or I'm a bureaucrat and I got to protect it. Or I'm a sheepdog and I want to protect the country, or, protect my religious beliefs. So 2nd plateau is much healthier. In fact, about 30-40% of America is in the 2nd plateau. And there's a lot of people who probably listen to your podcast who are stabilized at the 2nd plateau. And it's great. There's healthy aspects of 2nd plateau and there's unhealthy aspects. The unhealthy aspects is dogmatism, absolutism, and elitism, right? Because you're like, my religion is better than your religion. My football team is better than your football team. My country is better than your country. American exceptionalism falls into this. That's 2nd plateau. 3rd plateau is achiever. Both you and I have a strong achiever. Everyone on this call is a strong achiever. Like that means we're going to carve out our niche in this world and make a name for ourselves. And we're going to be financially independent. This is basically capitalism. Like we want to be entrepreneurs and capitalistic. We want to achieve, but like, as I just said about 3rd plateau has a positive and a negative. If you achieve at the expense of others, that's negative. If you hurt the environment, that's negative.
Yeah.
Right. So achievement, when you look at achievement, your 3rd plateau energy from the point of view of the 5th plateau, you will never be an achiever where it comes at the expense of anyone else. So the whole world of like conscious capitalism,
right,
or being a B corporation, that is 3rd plateau energy from a 5th plateau perspective. Now, 4th plateau, I know this is like really heady stuff. I'm trusting that all your listeners are going to be interested in this. So
we got brilliant listeners. These guys love this kind of stuff.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. 4th plateau is the sensitive pluralistic self. Now this is like the green movement, the elite liberal mindset that exists on the, where I live on the California coast and the East Coast. these are all the memes that you see in the world and being played out in social media around Me Too and Black Lives Matter. So that's the negative side.
Yeah.
The positive side is true care and concern for the environment. Like that would be the fourth plateau, you know, positive would be, I truly have a do no harm policy in my corporate interests where I'm not everything I do is going to be to make sure that I don't hurt the environment either locally or globally. That's a healthy fourth plateau, but I don't have to like go on social media and join Greenpeace, right? Those are negative shadow sides of this fourth plateau. But you can see now how the negative shadow side of fourth plateau is now fighting with the shadow side of the second plateau in our country, right?
Yeah. Most
conservatives are stuck in the second plateau, and most elite liberals are stuck in the shadow side of the fourth plateau, and the heavy dose of both in the third plateau, right? And all of a sudden you get this massive clash, right? Because no one's able to see the other side's perspective as valid. So where I'm going with this is through this type of training, when you integrate those 5 mountains and you begin to do the training that we espouse in Unbeatable Mind, and I'm not saying it's the only way to get there, then you ascend very rapidly vertically. Your consciousness ascends vertically, which means you grow. And you transcend but include the positive aspects of all these plateaus, and then you can ride them up and down and meet people where they're at and understand them and take their perspectives and help them find a greater perspective. But also you end up being center of gravity at this fifth plateau, which is integrated, world-centric, warrior leader. And you have great care and concern for all of humanity, but you're able to live locally and in your culture and tribe in a healthy manner. And you also become an evolutionary agent, which means you're a teacher and you're going to draw people both with your example and your energy and your teachings up to their own fifth plateau. And it doesn't take much time, right? With integrated training and development and with a group of people like you've created who are all working together to improve and themselves and hold each other accountable, you know, the whole tribe then becomes at a fifth plateau and then starts to orient their life and their organizations and their business and their language around that. Sorry about that little lecture, but
no, that's great. And as you're writing that, so it's interesting. Sometimes I'll have guests here.
My point. Let me go back to one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
So because you said this about warrior, every plateau has a warrior archetype, and the warrior archetype in the first plateau is going to be the person who picks up the gun and goes steal someone else's food at gunpoint, right?
Yeah.
Or threaten someone else like they did last night. That guy, maybe he's not a warrior, he's more of an asshole, but that's the energy. But
I hope he listens to the podcast.
There's not a chance that he's ever going to do that. The second plateau is the sheepdog, and like I said, it's great, but like you could have a fifth plateau sheepdog in the SEAL who goes over to Syria, and their attitude toward the Syrian or the ISIS is going to be very different than a second plateau warrior who wants to go play whack-a-mole. You know what I mean? And thinks that America's great and the enemy is everyone's evil. But a lot of the enemy I saw in Iraq were just trying to survive, right? And a lot of them were forced to fight, or else their daughter would be killed. So do I play whack-a-mole and just shoot everybody, or do I try to be more discerning and figure out like who's the real enemy here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So second plateau warrior is like the protector, but my country's better than your country, so I'm going to go, kill everybody. That's dangerous. That you get that led to the Crusades, and that's where Islam is coming from with their radical, radical behavior.
Yeah.
And the third plateau warrior, is going to be the entrepreneur warrior or the billionaire who doesn't really care about the environment, or the achiever, who, like I get out of the SEAL teams and I'm a second plateau. Now I'm going to go out and be, I'm going to write the books and I'm going to tell the stories and I don't give a shit about the consequences and, rah, I'm all ego, and that's not great either, So each one of these plateaus, you can express a warrior archetype from that perspective. And I've been working really hard over the last 15 to 20 years, and certainly accelerated in the last 5, to cultivate my fifth plateau perspective. And so the language I use is going to be much more naturally, inclusive, come from a place of, world-centric warrior, care and concern for everybody, and a great trust that humanity will work through some of the problems that are being frankly magnified by the negativity of the media. You know, if you step back from it all and you're like, we're living the most prosperous time ever known to humanity. You know what I mean? Like, poverty has practically been eradicated relative to what it was 100 years ago. You know, the poorest people in America have TVs and a car or more, you know, usually, unless they're homeless. And, you know, there's all sorts of indicators that we live in super abundant time, yet everyone thinks the world's falling apart.
Yeah.
And it's because of this negativity bias.
You know, it's interesting. I'll have sometimes a guest come on the podcast and they're talking about something that's so spot on as something else I'm working on. I mentioned that I was doing a course, putting together a course. One of the it's actually a separate kind of extra thing, like a bonus type of thing that we're putting into it. It's just basically finding your purpose is what the point of this extra piece is. And one of the things that I'm going through there is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And I'm kind of I'm trying to help people understand, like, there was a time when, not too long ago, when at the very bottom of that pyramid of needs was everybody just needs physical safety. They need, you know, food and shelter. And if they've got that, that's about all they can manage for their life, right? And they can't even control much of that. And unbeknownst to us, you know, most of us being born into our current culture, as you said, where poverty is almost eradicated and things are so much better, you know, we've kind of climbed up this pyramid of needs where most of our basic needs are met. And, but if we're not careful, we can still live as if, you know, our basic needs aren't met. Oh, I need that parking space. That's important, man. You know,
right.
but then we have this incredible opportunity to be right there at the top of that pyramid where we say, I get a chance to actually figure out what I'm all about, what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. Right. And not only do I have an opportunity, I have really a responsibility, because my grandparents and your grandparents and our great-great-grandparents and so on had to fight like hell just to get through life and, you know, to get us to where we are. And I think, you know, there needs to be some awareness of that for people to be able to say, look, this is a tremendous age in which we live, and an age in which we have a choice about how we see the world. And in many cases, people didn't have that knowledge. They didn't have those choices, or they didn't know they did. And so I think that we've got a big responsibility there.
Agree. And in many places in the world, that's, you know, they're still at the first level because their needs, like I mentioned, Syria and Africa and Sudan, and, you know, or if you're born in real poverty and you've got to go out and fight, you're at the bottom of that hierarchy. So if you're listening to this podcast and, you know, you're like you and I, or most people in America, you are at you have this incredible gift, and you're at a unique and singular time in history. And if you don't do something about actualization, it's on you, really, because it's been spoon-fed you. Now, I will tell you that Maslow is looking at that hierarchy of needs and saying, okay, once we get to self-actualization, then we can start to do the work. But he doesn't speak about what's the work. And that's where Unbeatable Mind comes in. We say, you know what? Guess what? There's also a hierarchy of emotional needs and a hierarchy of spiritual needs. But until you get to the tipping point of the pyramid, the self-actualization point that Maslow pointed to, you can't work on those because you're too busy, you know, out there getting your physical needs met. So what's cool is that actualization means, okay, now I've got to start looking at my hierarchy of emotional needs and begin to do that work. And that's where a lot of guys fall short, and then spiritual as well. And that, you know, you got to look beyond the structure and look beyond, you know, thinking that just because you're able to control your emotions doesn't mean you're still not steaming inside, you know, or you don't have all these different emotional patterns that are either epigenetic and have run through generations in your family or are all created in the first 10 years of your life that you don't have to work on. And so one of my big messages is that if you want to, you know, if you are serious about your physical training and you want to be a SEAL or an elite athlete, you hire a physical training coach, maybe more than one, and a nutritionist, right?
Yeah.
But nobody tries to develop, you know, to work on their emotions. So why wouldn't you also want an emotional coach? I mean, there's enough evidence now that at an elite level, when it comes to performance, it's your emotional state that really dictates whether you win or not and whether you can stay in the game over the long term. So why don't you get an emotional coach? Boom.
Yeah.
Where are the emotional coaches? Well, they're called therapists. And we're developing Unbeatable Mind coaches, you know, now, which are going to have that capacity, right? They're not therapists, but they're going to have the capacity to develop emotionally, because that's one of our 5 mountains. The third one, it's the one that everyone gets stuck on. And guess what? If you get stuck in that mountain, you can't develop the intuitive or the spiritual mountains. They're like layers. I call them like a Rorschach. If you think about like a Rorschach nesting doll or a Russian doll, the outer layer is the physical. You go through the physical by learning how to manage your physiology, learning how to train your body and get healthy. If your body's not healthy, you're kind of like back into that first level of Maslow's hierarchy, like you're broke or you're sick, and then you can't develop. Once you train the physical, then you can get into the mental, and the mental is where you begin to work the meditation and the imagery and the visual, the self-control in your brain, and then that extends to opening up your whole mind. And once you do that, then you can get into the emotional development, that third mountain. But most people never get there because they don't know how, or they don't have any guidance or a path to do that, and they don't have an emotional coach. And if you get stuck there, then you can never develop the intuitive and the spiritual side of yourself, which is where your true strength lies.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's absolutely needed in this day and age, and I think a lot of people are going to take advantage of that. And I think that's going to be an incredible service that you guys are doing for people out there. So that's great.
Yeah.
Let me wrap it up here with this last question. You're doing some awesome stuff out there. I've talked about this a little bit. You've talked about some of the things that you've got going on, the podcast, the books, just podcasts like this, coming on and being a guest and inspiring a lot of people. And what does it mean to you as a man? I don't know if you think about it like this, but what does it mean to you as a man to kind of in your heart of hearts, to do what you do, to look in the mirror every day and go, I just got to do something awesome today. What does that do? What is that doing for you?
To me, it's just my calling. You mentioned, your course on purpose. To me, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what is my purpose. I love that you're doing that. I believe everyone has a unique purpose in life. Everyone's got a calling. And unless you align with that calling and then start to activate it and to, bring it forth in the world, you're always going to feel incomplete. Yeah. You might feel a sense of agitation or like you've sold out. And so it's really important to spend time really reflecting, meditating on, journaling on, and really, calling forth that calling or drawing forth that calling. I talk about how that happened to me in my 20s when I was in the Zen meditation bench as a CPA. I was a CPA getting my MBA at New York University in my early 20s. And it was that introspective work and the alignment and drawing forth my calling. I didn't use that terminology back then, but that's what was happening. That led me to be like, holy cow, I'm completely misaligned. I'm going in the wrong direction. And I'm really meant to be a warrior and a leader and a Navy SEAL. And then over time that evolved to be a warrior, leader, teacher, which is what I'm doing today. So I'm in total alignment. So to answer your question, all I do every day is get up and do what I'm supposed to do. Just like, my dog gets up and does what my dog is supposed to do. My dog is very happy. He's supposed to, he's supposed to love me. He's supposed to eat. He's supposed to poop. He's supposed to take walks, supposed to smile a lot. He's just doing what he does. And I feel like when you're aligned with your calling, you just get up and do what you're supposed to do. And you don't think much about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't have I know that financial freedom, is part of that and will come, and I have it, but there's more of that that'll come. That's fine. And that just means I can do more with that money to reach more people and probably give more away and also, leave some legacy for my children. Whoopee shit. You know what I mean? I don't look at my success in terms of how many bricks there are in the wall that I'm building. It's, am I doing like back to one lifetime? Is this day complete? Right. Yeah. So I measure my day at the end of the day. I'm clear about what I want to do. I make sure my rifle's clean and my bow is tight. And then I make sure I shoot straight. And so that requires a lot of training, a lot of practice every day. And then at the end of the day, I look back at my battles and I say, how'd I do? Did I get the enemy? Did I refine myself in the process? What did I learn? And do I have any regrets? Things that I wish I could have done differently? If so, recapitulate, let them go. Right.
Yeah.
So that way I'm not dragging emotion. I'm not creating new emotional negativity or new negative karma, let's say, to use a term from the yoga world. I'm actually clearing it every day. And so it's very liberating. True freedom, comes from clearing away all your regrets and aligning with your purpose. and then just going at it day in and day out. And that's where true peace of mind comes from. That's what, to me, being a man, there's a lot of things that mean being a man. Sure, I have my responsibility to be the best father I could be and the best husband I could be, and to provide for my family and to be a warrior in the world. All that's just part and parcel of me doing what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
As a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
If I fall short of any of those, then I'm not living up to my potential.
Yeah.
And doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Man, that's great.
I don't think I answered your question very well. But,
no, you did. No, it was great. You did a great job. I think it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of answer, and that's what I love about it.
Right.
So
I
appreciate that. I appreciate you, really sharing not only your mind behind what you do, but also your heart behind what you do. Getting in deep with us about, just kind of diving into some of the 5 pillars there and those kinds of things. I think it's been a great conversation, and I want to thank you.
It's been a lot of fun. I agree.
Good. I want to thank you again for coming on here. And how can the guys who are checking you out, listen to this podcast, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, my podcast is Mark Divine's Unbeatable Mind. Like we found in iTunes or all the normal places. Our website is unbeatablemimind.com, or I have a personal website at markdivine.com. So that's one way. Someone's interested in inquiring about our training, if they can't find the answer on Unbeatable Mind, or sealfit.com is our hardcore physical training, they can always send an email at info@unbeatablemind.com or info@sealfit.com, and my staff will get back to you right away and answer all your questions and help you get prepared for some of the training and whatnot. And if you're inspired by the philosophy that I talked about today, my book Unbeatable Mind is at Amazon, probably the easiest place to buy it.
That's great. I'm really excited.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic conversation. I'm excited to see your podcast in this year as well, 2019. I know you had some great guests on last year, and I'm just excited to see what kind of conversations you have and who you bring on this year. So it'll be good.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be a blast.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, man. Good luck with everything. It's great talking to you.
All right, thanks. Well, there you have it, men. I'd love to know what you thought about the episode. Feel free to reach out to me on any of my social media networks. And look, if you got something out of this, make sure another guy does too. Share the episode and make sure it gets in front of the guys that need to hear it the most. Until next time, keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.